Hi everyone. I think we can start. Can you hear me? Okay, please let me know if you can hear me, and if everything is fine, we can start. Okay, so let's start. This event is the first event for Mobile Twente Meetup group and one of a lot of events for Java user group Lodz. And today it will be merge event. I hope people from both community will be happy to hear and learn something new. So let's start. Let's start with some details. So first of all, here you can find a QR code, or in chat will be posted link to Menti, and in Mentimeter you can ask question, and I will answer for all of these questions connected Jetpack Compose or any other questions. So let's start with. Okay, maybe let's wait a few minutes for a few more people. And after it we can start. Thank you for posting codes and link to Mentimeter. Okay, maybe let's start. So first of all, I'm Zhukovich, an Android developer at takeaway.com. Our company in multiple countries known as a takeaway, Pishne, Lifer Health, Lifer and so forth. But today not about company. Today we will talk only about Jetpack Compose and which possibility Jetpack Compose provides for us. So let's start with some overview about the latest releases which we have for Android development connected with a UI development. So the first big release was in 2008, and it was released Android 1.0. Next big release, it was release of Android Studio. I personally started before Android Studio, and I remember fun time with Eclipse, Android SDK, multiple plugins, and probably many people who started before Android Studio can work with XML and layout with XML pretty without any problem, because with Eclipse it was a lot of fun working with visual editing of layout, because it's working not so well. So the next big release, it was in 2014. It was release of Recycler View. Previously we used list view, and we had a lot of problem with performance for scrollable list. From my perspective, the main problem is not strict rules how to work with scrollable list. As example, in Recycler View we have view holder, and Recycler View forces us to use a view holder. After a few years, we have two big releases: is constraint layout and support design libraries. I think right now a lot of applications use constraint layout. And constraint layout is a solution for avoiding nested structures, but I think everyone knows what is constraint layout. So support design libraries. Support design libraries, it's a very powerful tool. Previously, everything was built in Android, all views. Later on, we had support libraries, which has less dependency to the Android operation system. And support design library has recycler views, snackbar, and many other elements and views which help us to develop better Android applications. Year after it, we had next big release. It was material design component. It's an evolution of support design library and support libraries. And last year we had release of Jetpack Compose. Jetpack Compose was announced, and right now it's in a developer preview version. Unfortunately, it's not ready yet for production, but I think today talk will be helpful for many people to know what is Jetpack Compose, because the way of working with Jetpack Compose is fully different what we have in current Vue framework. Before moving to Jetpack Compose, I want to speak a bit about current Vue frameworks, because if we need new solution, we should understand why and which problem we have, and later on we can compare if a new framework has the same problem or its new version and its evolution of current framework. So let's start with Android. Android was released at the beginning in 2008, and one of problem connected with UI that all views was stored or was placed in ROM of Android operation system. And of course it was a problem because very often you buy a new phone and your phone have 1 or 2 updates of operation system, sometimes no updates at all. And let's imagine that one of components, let's say text view, has a problem, and you as a developer cannot really fix it because you need update of operation system, and you should wait. And for some users, they will have updates, but some users maybe not. And of course, it's not really great. And Google announced that they will have support libraries. Main idea of support libraries is to have new features which are available on newer version of Android for all devices without any update. And it's working well. Later on, it was moved to the Android X, and right now I think a lot of company, or maybe not a lot, but many of them use Android X. So the next big issue with Android and with Vue framework is fragmentation. As you can see here, here are 4 methods from text view, and all these methods have required different version of IP, and of course it can be problematic for us because as a developer we really want to use it one method for all devices, but sometimes you can have a situation when you need write the same features with different IP for different version. And of course, it's not really great, and it's a real problem, especially when we're talking about big applications. The next problem is inheritance. And if you take a look at Vue class, it will be more than 29,000 lines of code. And text view extends Vue, and it makes our code bigger and bigger. And the main problem is that if we speak about buttons, and we really want to use some methods, we should know which methods we can use. Because as you can see on the screenshot, we can really easily create a selectable button, but it's not really popular case for mobile development, especially for Android. But we can easily use it because it's available for the text view, and our button extends text view. And as you can see, after button you have many other views which also easy to use. If you create many views, custom views, you probably know that you always write for the same constructors. They fully the same instead of name of constructor. And it's real example of checkbox. And in this case, we have only 1 method, but we should write around 10 lines of code or even a bit more just for similar constructor for all views. And of course, it's not really comfortable, and we should always write boilerplate code. So let's speak a little bit about Jetpack Compose and which possibilities give us. So first, very important, know that Jetpack Compose don't use current view framework at all. It's something new, it's something what was created fully from scratch. So here are three really important features and requirements of Jetpack Compose. First of all, it's fully unbundled from Android operation system. You should connect set of library compilator plugin, and later on you can use Jetpack Compose. Right now, minimum version of Jetpack Compose is Android 5. Right now, it maybe sounds that it's pretty big version, but I think around a year, half a year, maybe we need to release. And during release date, it shouldn't be so complicated for people just to have minimum version as Android 5. The next benefit is that developers of Jetpack Compose want to have interoperability with current view framework. Right now, it's not ready. However, we know how it will look like, and we will talk about it a little bit later. And requirement that we need Android Studio 4.1, because Jetpack Compose, it's not only library, it's compilation plugin and some plugin already installed in new version of Android Studio. That's why we also need Android Studio 4.1. Latest release, if I remember correctly, is beta 9, but it's always updating, and Jetpack Compose work better and better in your Android Studio, of course. So Jetpack Compose is split into three big areas, and first of all, it's runtime. Speaking about runtime, when you create composable function, your composable function will be drawn on the canvas. That means some part of runtime we have in our application. Another part of runtime we have in Android Studio, because with Jetpack Compose we have preview functionality, and we can see all our changes in Android Studio without installing it on device. So speaking about plugin we have on as part of Android Studio, and of course we have compilation plugin, and we have set of libraries with UI components, like library for core, for animations, for UI components, and much more. If I remember correctly, we have around 18 different libraries which we can use, but some of them also needed for Android Studio and preview functionalities. So let's take a look at one of the simplest examples of Jetpack Compose. Let's try to build something like small calendar application. And in this calendar application, we need calendared item. And in this item, we will have some date. So speaking about dates, as you can see, we should mark our composable function with compose annotation. And later on, we can pass any parameters of any strings. So later on, first of all, we need to draw a circle, and for drawing circle we can use surface, and in this surface we can easily set shape, border, and modifiers. The main idea of Jetpack Compose is that we can use a lot of modifiers and we can combine them, and it makes it really powerful, and later on we will talk about it more. So right now we have a surface in a circle, and we want to place all our element in the center of the circle, and we can use box. Box is something like a container, and in this container we can place our layouts. And one of easiest layout in Jetpack Compose is column, and column allow us to place our items in column. And here we have month, here we have our date, and here we have name of the day. And as you can see, it's pretty easy. And here very cool situation which we can change column to the row, and our item will be placed in different way. Column and row, it's something pretty similar to linear layout in Android which we have right now. But before going to the next steps, we should talk about preview annotation. Preview annotation is built, it's part of plugin for Android Studio, and with preview annotation we can render some our composable functions in Android Studio, and we don't need to reinstall it to our device, and of course it saves a lot of time during development process. In one file we can have as many as we need composable functions with preview annotations. But of course we should understand that we can add 25, 40 or 100, but amount of RAM which use Android Studio will be fully different. And sometimes it can create a lot of problems for us. So Jetpack Compose use Kotlin as main language, and with Kotlin we can group it very well. So we have calendar date. Let's create alias and call it calendar date for this case. And later on we can have a calendar week, and calendar week which will place everything in a row, all this item. In this case we have all similar data. It was added just for simplicity, just to show powerful of DSL with Jetpack Compose and how it can be easily combined with Kotlin. And right now we have a row, and we can add for we can add for column, and with all these small manipulations we already can have pretty maybe not super beautiful but good enough calendar week. Of course right now date is the same, but we can easily configure it with parameters. And as you can see, it's super readable, because in calendar we have calendar week, and in calendar week we have calendar date, and it's super readable for everyone. So right now we know how to create composable functions. We know that we can preview some changes in Android Studio, but right now we want to add it to the application. And if you want to add this to the application, what we need is to attach it to the activity or to the fragment, and fragment also can be attached to the activity. So in this case we have setContent function, and in setContent function we can add composable function, and after it will be rendered in our application, and we can see any changes, because activity is in any way entry point to the Android application. So right now next step to Jetpack Compose, because we should understand what does composable mean. So with Jetpack Compose we can create pretty simple function marked with compose annotation. In addition to it, with Jetpack Compose we have model annotation and model list class, but if we pass any data, any class to our counter composable functions, we can easily change values. In current view framework, if you want to redraw something, you should call a function. However, in Jetpack Compose, if you use model annotations or you store your data in model list, it will be automatically tracked, and if something changed inside this data class with model annotation, whole function will be redrawn, and you don't need to do anything with it. As example, here we have a count field, and when we have plus and minus button, and when we click to the minus button, data inside counter model class was changed, and counter function will be redrawn, and you don't need to do anything. You don't need to do anything with it. So model annotations allow us to add trackability to our class. It can be class, it can be data class. It's not a problem for the compiler. Sometimes we want to have more than one counter, and for us super important to track each counter. In addition to it, In addition to it, we really want to see if something was added to our list, removed or modified, and for it we have model list. And composable function will be tracked all changes in content of model list, and if it's needed, function will be redrawn. So let's speak a bit about layouts, because it's super complicated to create any UI without layouts. It's super powerful tool, which of course can be used in Jetpack Compose too. So we have 4 layouts. It's row, column, stack, and constraint layout. If we combine row and column, we will have something like linear layout, what we have right now, and with different orientations. Speaking about stack, it's something like when we can use gravity as example and have item to the top right corner or in the middle of a screen. Of course, it's complicated to create great layout using only stack. And we have constraint layout. With constraint layout, we can do what we can build right now with constraint layout. Developer of Jetpack Compose also announced that we will have constraint layout and motion layout with the same feature as we have it right now with Android X library. So it will be fully featured layout. So let's speak about each of them, and let's start with row. When we place item inside row, in this case we place image and text. And speaking about row layout, everything will be placed in a row. If you will use this layout, probably you need to combine multiple modifiers, especially if image is bigger than text and you want to place it on one line. The next example is column. Code will be fully the same inside layout, and we change only row to the column. And it will work in the same way as with linear layout. We had some views, and we can change orientation, and everything will be look like a bit different. Let's speak about stack layout. With stack, the very important parameter is gravity. And speaking about gravity, we have a bottom end, center top end, and much more, and we can just place all our items. However, of course, it's super complicated to create fully featured layout only with stack, because as example, if screen is our parent and we want to have a latte in the center of this container when we have all these elements, probably it will be overlap with image, and of course it's not really great. And the last big and important part is constraint layout. With constraint layout, whole implementation split it into 2 parts. First part is constraint set, and inside this constraint set we should define all our constraints. Right now, key for all our constraints is a string, so I recommend to create constants, and I show it a bit later when we will talk about more advanced example. And when we created constraints, for these constraints, for this tags, we can add some constraints. And later on, we should find a tag with all these constraints for the lambda functions of constraint layout function when we really build our UI. Yeah, and in this small talk, we will try to build something like this application, and my choice for exactly such application is pretty simple. When we check something new, it will be really great to check something which is used in many applications. If you try to open Play Store and download 10 applications, you will see fully the same stuff, because it's a master detail flow. You have list, you have cart with some data, and I try to build pretty similar example. And of course, this sample support dark and light theme for right now. If you're interested in this example, you can check GitHub repository and check how it's really work and import to Android Studio. So I complicate this example a bit and added two types of cards. It will be a list item and extended card. And as you can see on the toolbar, we have two different icons. When we see list of items, we have icon with extended card, and when we have list with extended card, we can add we can show icon with a list of items. And this small complication really shows the power of Jetpack Compose and how it can be really easy used. So, speaking about creating a card, first of all, we need to start with a model. In Jetpack Compose, we need model almost for everything, and it's something really powerful mechanism, because when we have model, it will be tracked and function will be recomposed. And it's super powerful mechanism in Jetpack Compose. And later on, we need to create a functions with some item as a parameter, and of course with empty body at the beginning. If it's a model and everything in immutable and only its favorite is mutable because it can be favorite or not, and if parameters for favorite will be changed, whole composable function will be redrawn. However, the very important information is that it doesn't mean that whole UI will be redrawn. No, only part which is really changed will be redrawn, and we as developers should do nothing for it. It's absolutely for free for us. So, at the beginning, I propose to implement this whole item as row and column layout. So, right now we see we can split all this UI for three different blocks, and all blocks place in a row. So let's use row layout and create three boxes. Later on, some of these boxes will be removed, but for additional playing with this layout, it will be a great exercise. So for the icon, we want to use box 72 to 72 dp, and for the favorite, we will have a rectangle for 40 dp as width and 72 dp as height. And for the center block, when we have coffee name and list of ingredients, we want to provide full available space for this box, and for it we use weight. You can find a lot of similarities with linear layout here. So let's speak about our first block. And in first block we have icon, and below the icon I hope you can see it's a small circle. So for building the circle, we can use surface as we used before. And here we have first example when we can combine our modifiers, and we can do it with plus sign and combine preferred size plus padding, or we can use preferred size dot padding, of course with parameters. It will work fully the same. And when we build our modifier right now, its size of surface is 72 dp, minus 16 dp of padding from left and right sides, and as a result, our circles will be 40 dp to 40 dp. Here we also can use shape and color. And inside this container, which right now it's 40 dp to 40 dp, what we can do, we can place an image. So speaking about image, we can use Painter, and with Painter we can use image resources which is already placed in our applications. As you can see, we can easily work with resources with Jetpack Compose. As the next container, of course, we need a box which will use all available place, and here we can use column layout with title with coffee name and a list of ingredients. As you can see here, we also can use pretty similar stuff like modifier. We also use max line and ellipse size if it's super long. I think it should be super readable. However, for the first time, it can be a bit complicated. And for the last part of our item, we need a toggleable. Toggleable composable functions provide us possibility just to not only show an image, but show toggleable object, which can be, of course, which can change the state. And what is really important here is that it's a Kotlin, and Kotlin is a powerful language. And in Kotlin, we can easily use if-else statement. And when we come back to our traditional approach without data binding, we had a problem that we had one layout, and if we want to really do the same examples and just show different icons, we should write some code in Kotlin or Java. And of course, it was complicated. And here we have one composable functions which handles state of it and can just work with it perfectly. And we have all functionalities for the small composable function in one place. However, right now we have a next situation when our code is super big, and write this code for the first time, it's not a problem, but later on we should maintain it, of course. And when we need to maintain it, it can be a problem. However, it's a Kotlin, we can create multiple composable functions and transform this long code to something like this. And in this example, we can have a composable function for displaying logo. We can have containers which will place everything in a column. And inside this container, we can place title and ingredients. And below this container, later in a row, we can place favorites. And right now, this code is very readable. And if you found that you have some issue with list of ingredients, you can go to the ingredients composable functions and just fix your issue, and you wouldn't have any problem with it. And it will be super readable and super small for us. So right now we have a list, and right now we have a list item, and we want to build a list. So for building a list, we can use adapter list. And in adapter list has a parameter, and in this parameter we can pass list of data. And if it's list of data, it will work like a for loop, and we have results in we have parameters which we get from Lambda, and we can just call our composable function, and we will have a list. However, we want to make this list item clickable, and for making it clickable, we should wrap all our composable function inside with a clickable composable function. And here we have our modifier, and here we have our onClick. For onClick, we can do whatever we want. As example, open other activity if it's interesting for us in this case. And of course, for with modifier, we can easily add animation like ripple. It's just a modifier, and you can create your own animation with modifier and use it super simple. You don't need to create any other XML file and try to merge everything in one place. The more tricky example is try to add some divider below each item. For it, we need another composable function. In this case, let's call it coffee drink divider. And in this divider, we know that we want to have the situation when this divider starts below our text. And we already know that our logo container is 72 to 72 dp, and we can easily inside this class extract it to constants or pass a parameter to our divider with the space. and we can super easily handle it. And here is super important part for our UI. It's draw opacity. It helps us to change opacity for our composable function, and it's will use a lot for theming, and we will talk a little bit later. So right now we built a list of items, and if you want to have multiple types of cards, we need to create a toolbar. In Jetpack Compose, it's called top up bar. We also have bottom up bar for bottom navigation. And here, for us, super interesting is few parameters. First of all is title. Speaking about title in traditional toolbar, it was a bit tricky. It's super easy if you want to have just text, but if you want to have something a bit more complicated, some layout with items, it will be a problem. However, in Jetpack Compose, it's super simple, because type of title, it's not a string, it's composable function. And if it's composable functions, we can create any layout as we want. In this example, we use only text, but in practice, we can use whatever we want or whatever is needed for us. With background color, everything is simple. We just put our color. And if we want to add our menu item, we need to use actions. And with actions, we can, inside actions, we can create as many icon buttons as we need. And inside this icon button, we can use icon for drawing an icon, or we can use a text. And of course, in on-click, we can do some actions when user press on this button. So in this case, we have two different icons for two different states. So let's create another model class. And in this model class, we will have status of displaying list, and we will have this model class will have only one parameter: is detailed item true or false. So speaking about detailed item, inside our icon we can write simple if-else statement and load proper icon for current state. If our state is detailed list item, in this case we can just load icon list wide, or in other case we can load extended list wide icon. As you can see, everything placed in one composable functions and can be super simple handled. In case of constraint layout, we have fully new screen, and it was an idea try to use different layouts for different screens just to show different cases. And in this case, we have constraint layout, which has two parts. It's constraint set, and together with constraint set, we have a lambda with our composable functions, where we can use other composable functions. So let's start with building constants for our tags. And speaking about when we finish with it, we can create our constraints. And as example constraint for surface and header, and for it we can use tag and tag with our string key. And when we created it, for some composable functions, as example box, we can just apply our constraints using tag modifier with our key. Oh, yes, sorry for that. Yes, and the next step, we should apply our constraints to our tag. And here, in case of parent, it will be container. In our case, container is whole screen. And as example, we want to create a surface, and surface should fill all screen. It's super simple. However, in pretty similar way, you can base on other tags. Instead of parent, you can use other tag, and everything will work perfectly. So I really want to show one super interesting example and show power of working with string. So we have some description, and let's try to do the same situation as we have on the screenshot. And in this case, I mean, if it's our main coffee and this card about this coffee, in this case about Americano, it can be bold. If it's some other type of coffee drink, it can be underlined. So let's try to create a data class substring just for simplicity. And in this substring, we can have string and start and end position in whole text. The next step is to get our name substring, and for name substring, it will return our substring with, and because we should know when our in this case Americano text started and finished. And we have the same for all substrings of other drinks from the coffee. And right now what we need to do is to create annotated string. When annotated string is created from any string, we can add styles, but when we want to add some style, in this case we change color, font weight and font size, and in this case we need start and end. Exactly for this reason we created substring class. And right in this case it's super simple. We know that our Americano start from position 0 and finish at position n, and we add style for this substring. In pretty similar case, for all substrings which were found, in our case it's only espresso, we also add style with start and end position and some custom style, and here for these styles we use underline decorator. So right now we built some few screens of our applications, and right now we need to handle how it can work, how we can work with these screens. And of course, routing is super important topic for any application, especially when we speak about new framework. So speaking about routing, we have a few different options. First set of options I call traditional approach. And speaking about traditional approach, we can use fragments or activity and navigate between them. In this case, we don't use anything from Jetpack Compose because everything rendered on activity or fragment. If we want to go to another screen, we just go to another activity, and another activity has another composable functions which render content. However, if we go with Jetpack Compose approach, we need to create another model. And as I told before, model it's super powerful and super important mechanism for working with Jetpack Compose. In this case, we created upstate model, and upstate model store instance of the screens. Screen is sealed class, and here we have few instances. Example, coffee drinks. It's a simple string. It's a simple screen, and coffee drink details. It's an object of screen, but with additional parameter. And the next step is to create navigate to function, and here we just use here we have just destination as a string as a parameter. And here I want to remember the super important note about Jetpack Compose. Speaking about Jetpack Compose, if its trackable object pass as a parameter and this trackable object changed, it will be redrawn. Right now our state is something like a global state for our application. And if state changed, functions will be redrawn. And as a composable functions, we are using a crossfade function. Crossfade function allows us to change one composable function with another composable function. It means that if one composable function represents whole screen and parameters will change for our upstate data class, it will be redrawn and display another screen. And as you can see here inside crossfade, we current screen returns us one of screens, and right now we have only two. It's coffee drink or coffee drink details. And using just simple checking, we can load required screens. And in this case, it's super simple, and it's again, so model, it's super powerful. And I think it's one of the most important concepts of Jetpack Compose, because it's super powerful and it can be used for everything in Jetpack Compose, of course. So let's speak about themes, because of course building plain with only with UI, it's without styling, without theming, it's first of all boring, and from another side it's a requirement from our competitors, because right now many applications support a light and dark theme. And of course, if we want to have a focus and have a situation when user will choose our application, it's also should support different themes. This application support dark and light themes, and right now I'll want to talk a bit how it's achievable for us. So first of all, we can check documentation of material design, and if we check documentation of material design for themes, we can find one really interesting information, that in this documentation they defined list of colors like primary, secondary, background, surface, primary variant, and so forth. And all these colors, it's color for the background. However, when colors start from on, like on primary, on secondary, etc., it means that it's color for the font, which will be displayed on the some background. As example, if we have primary color, background color as a black, on primary probably will be white, because it will be contrast and easy to read. And this you can find in documentation for material design. And this is super cool, because starting from this moment, when your designers implement some design based on material design guidelines, it means that you will speak with the same language. If designer provide a set of these colors, it means that you can use these colors, and you will understand which colors you should use, which transparency, and so forth. So right now, the very important questions, we defined these light and dark styles, as we have in this case. We can use functions light color palette and dark color palette. Dark color palette don't have primary and secondary variants, because it's not so needed for the dark theme. So let's speak about how we can choose which palette we can use. And again, it's Kotlin, and we can use if-else statement. And here we have a predefined function isSystem in dark theme. It's return true or false. If it's returned true, we use dark theme. If it's returned false, we use light theme colors. And later on, we have one of root functions for whole content. It's material theme function. And in material theme function, we can pass all our colors. And of course, if we use preview function to preview how content will be rendered, we should also add this material theme for our preview functions. However, sometimes it's not enough for us, because we can apply some color using material theme dot colors as example on surface for our text view. But here it's also very important that material theme dot color dot on surface, it's not only the color, it's a style. let me finish this slide and I'll answer for your question. Yes, if on surface it's whole theme, and if we want to use custom other parameter than colors, we can just create copy of this object and use it. So if it's not material design theme, you can in any way use a light color palette, and because any application have some primary color. And speaking about this primary color, you will have primary, secondary, and you can define this color as you want. Of course, you can completely ignore whole mechanism of theming and color palettes, but in some places and can generate a lot of issues. Because even right now, if we think about current solution which we used right now for Android, we have a lot of colors in many projects, and handling all these colors, it can be complicated. However, very often, as main color for the applications, we use one or two colors, and in this case, one or two colors can be set with primary and secondary colors and other. However, you can completely ignore it. Yes, the next big topic is typography. In typography, it's also something fully new, and approach is fully different. And first of all, how we have it right now. Right now, it's look like a bit strange, because in case if you have a custom view, you can have all fonts as example. You can use your button, and let's call it my button. And for this my button, you can apply font, and for all these my buttons will be similar font. However, sometimes we can have a situation when font applied for some view inside XML. And if we go with this approach, it's super simple to forget to apply font, and it can be super tricky for us. With Jetpack Compose, first of all, we need to create our font family. Speaking about font family, we can create different. In this case, it's just Roboto font, official font from Google, and here we have resource ID. Of course, font should be inside application. Right now, it's not available use a downloaded font in Jetpack Compose, but Jetpack Compose in developer preview stage, and later on it will be improved. So, and we have weight and style. If we open Google Fonts website, we can find all weights and all styles. And based on this weight and styles, a font will be picked when you describe your style. And later on, when we created our font family, for our font family, we can create other text, which is also available in material design documentation. And we have text like H1, H2, H3, body 1, body 2, and many others. And you can define your font for this component. However, by default for typography, we have default style, and everything is already defined. As you can see, even in this example, first of all, we created default typography, and for default typography, we just modified our font, because when we speak about H1 parameter, H1, it's not a font, it's a whole style. And if we want for the whole style modify only font, we should use copy for H1. It's a bit boilerplate, maybe later on it will be improved, but right now it's working in this way. So, and for typography, it's pretty similar to colors. And material theme has two parameters, it's color and typography. And as our root composable functions, it can has colors and typography, which we define in our application. However, if we want to use for the text something different, we can use typography. we can use material theme.typography as example h5. However, for some components, as example for button, styles already defined, and they by default use material theme dot typography dot button, and some other also use default predefined colors, because by default material theme are applied. So at the end of this talk, of course, Jetpack Compose is super huge right now, but I try to show pretty interesting and the most important topics. If this Jetpack Compose topic is interesting, I will be happy to present other topic of Jetpack Compose with more details. But Jetpack Compose have so many features even right now that it's super complicated to compress everything in one topic. So very important notes for Jetpack Compose. First of all, Android has super powerful mechanism for working with resources. And when we speak about working with resources, it's strings, translations, images, and much more. So with Jetpack Compose, we can easily work with strings, because in all previous examples, I use hard-coded string just for simplicity. If we want to use strings from resources, we can easily use a string resource function and put our key for the string. For the icon, we have image resources and much more. And amount of such functions and possibility to working with resources is increases from release to release. Jetpack Compose even right now support right to left. Of course, it should be implemented for some layout. Few version back, it wasn't implemented for constraint layout, but right now it's supported, and you can easily use it, and you don't need to do anything with it. It's everything work out of the box. So speaking about UI tests, the most important note about UI test that Jetpack Compose draw everything on the canvas. Right now, if you use Layout Inspector for analyzing a view hierarchy for a Jetpack Compose application, you can see only one view, and it's view called Composable view. And inside this Composable view, you have whole UI. And it means that it's not possible to use Espresso, because Espresso use view hierarchy, and we have nothing in view hierarchy except one view, which is in practice canvas, and we cannot really get data. However, in Jetpack Compose, they have mechanism for understanding each view and when this view placed. And one of libraries with Jetpack Compose is library for UI testing. And here we have methods like find by text, find by substring. These functions is pretty similar to Espresso. However, from my side, it's a bit better. We have less boilerplate, because with Espresso it's working pretty well, but we have a lot of boilerplate code, pretty similar. And here we have find by text as example, and assert is displayed. With Espresso it will be a bit more code, but no, not super big difference. And here we need to use our rules, and for our rule we need to use we should create our own function like launch coffee drink screen, and these functions will just add required composable function to our string. Of course, it can be generic, and as a parameter has composable function. And even right now it's possible, and some UI tests already you can find in the project. So the next big topic is interoperability, and it's not working yet. It was announced in one of Google presentation about Jetpack Compose. So we can apply generate view annotation to composable function, and during compilation will be created traditional view with current view framework, and we can use it as example in XML. For me, it's pretty interesting because right now, if you create composable functions, you need to write less code than just for creating custom view. And I think at the beginning, probably people will just use Jetpack Compose for generating some view because it's less code. And three very important notes. Animations are supported, and even right now possible to create super cool animation with Jetpack Compose. I'm not super familiar with Flutter, but many people tell that it's pretty similar for what we have with Flutter. And view for map and view for web wouldn't be created from scratch. We will use native views, and for this native view will be created composable wrappers for feeling like you work with composable functions, but in practice, under the hood, it will be native views. Because everything drawn on the canvas, and for the map it can be a lot of rework, and for the view it also can be super complicated to create something like this. However, for map and for if we talk about Chrome tabs, it's working pretty well right now. And you should remember that it's in developer preview stage, and it means that I highly don't recommend to use it in production. I really recommend to play with it, but don't recommend to use it in production because some version ago you had some changes and some file was moved to another package and your code not compiling anymore, and sometimes you should spend few hours just to fix this issue. It's a developer preview, and for developer preview it's normal, but if you add it to production you will have a lot of fun and your productivity wouldn't be so great. And thank you for your time, and I highly encourage ask question. Here you have QR code, or you can find a link in the comments. In addition to it, I highly recommend explore more Jetpack Compose. It's super powerful. I really believe it's a future of UI development. Maybe with interoperability functionalities at the beginning, and later on I think more and more people will follow with Jetpack Compose. From time to time I write about Jetpack Compose and other Android topic on my blog, and if you want to discuss something or have any question, you can also find me on Twitter. So right now let's take a look at some questions which we have on the chat, and after it we just switch to Menti. So does Compose part of Kotlin multi-platform? So can we use it for iOS also? Right now, not really. However, ideally we can have some versions of Jetpack Compose for the web and for iOS, but right now we have only for Android. Ideally, it can be like whole frameworks which can be used for Kotlin multi-platform. But right now, for Android part, you can use Jetpack Compose, and for iOS part, you can use, as example, Swift UI. It's other declarative framework. So let's take a look. At question on Menti. Let me check other link. If you have any question, please ask. And right now we check a link, and I answer to all questions. Unfortunately, I cannot see any question. Andrzej, maybe you can write a comment with questions on the chat, because unfortunately I cannot see any questions with Menti. Okay, yeah, it's my fault. Sorry. Thank you, Yele, for the help. So let's start from the first question. And what do we have? Custom theme with doesn't follow material design. Yes, I answer on this question. We can use. Thank you, Yele. Yes, we can use custom colors, or we can use hold this mechanism and use primary color, secondary color, etc. So, top questions. Do I need to rewrite the whole app from scratch to use Compose? Can I keep part of application using classic view? And yes and no. Yes, you can do it if for routing you use different activities and fragments. If you want to use whole Jetpack Compose routine, or you have few libraries for it, it will be problematic because it's fully composable. It's fully composable code, and it's not possible. But yes, if you use activities or fragments, and your screen is fragment or activity, you can easily use it. A model annotation is going to be removed in the next Compose release. And what I said, it's right now what we have is it's developer preview version. And if you're using Jetpack Compose, you should be ready for have such issues. However, as I know, we will have some alternative. But right now it's needed, and maybe we will have something different what we have right now on release. But I think the whole concept, which we use composable functions, which track data, which track object and render whole screen, this concept will be pretty the same. And based on it, I think something can change, of course. How should we deal with immutability on models? So speaking about immutability, you can, of course, have everything immutable. However, from my perspective, it's not always have sense. As example, with when we have coffee drink and it can be favorite or not. Of course, we can it can be immutable, and we can use model list, and for this model list we can create a copy with other value, but I don't think it's really needed. It will have some issue for performance because of course it's fully new object, and for some cases it can be rendered from scratch. I recommend to use immutability in model classes when it's really needed. Okay, the next question. Yes. Yes. Does it have accessibility support? To be honest, I didn't check it yet, but right now it's developer preview version. And as I know, at developer preview version, developers of Jetpack Compose really want to use use and to follow the main features. Even on one of latest release, Kotlin coroutine support was added, and right now Jetpack Compose team working on more important features. However, for sure accessibility will be released, because main idea of Jetpack Compose that it will be possible to create fully featured application, and accessibility is one of very important requirement for applications. So next question. Yes. Is composable view can observe live data changes? Yes, in Jetpack Compose we can create custom function observe. If you check one of a feature branch in my repository with these applications, you can find it's. I'm changing it right now to the live data, but yeah, it can be doable pretty easy. On latest release, they also added support for the Kotlin flow, and you can also use it. Did you compare Compose with Facebook Litho? Not really. Not really, and maybe I'm wrong, but as I know, Facebook use current view framework under the hood, and it's not really fair to compare them because they use fully different approach. In addition to it, Jetpack Compose on a developer preview stage right now, and of course it can be not really fair to compare something which is developer preview version and improve from version to version, and something which was released. I think it's a good topic to compare them on the release of Jetpack Compose, and based on it we can say if it makes sense or not. In addition to it, probably Compose will have a bit better performance, and the reason for it is pretty simple, because one of ideas which developers of Jetpack Compose have right now is to have possibility to render view on different threads, and for it use Kotlin coroutines. And right now, when we speak about current view framework, view can be rendered only on the main thread. If supporting coroutines will be pretty well, I believe it will be a bit faster than what we have right now. Yes, we can use vector images without any problem with Jetpack Compose. We have different painters when we working with images, and one of this painter and image painter, and other, if I remember, it's something for vectors, probably vector painter. And yeah, we can use it, we can use tints, we can change it. You also can find some examples in the repository. Based on a Slack channel and official view from Google developers from this team, it can be implemented. It can be also implemented for web and for other platforms, and theoretically in futures it can be used for multi-platforms, for Kotlin native multi-platform, but right now it's not available. Right now it's available only for Android. Will Compose deliver its own image downloader, or it can be used current tool? You can use current tools. You can even find extensions for current libraries, probably for Picasso and Glide, and use also part of Jetpack Compose. It's not a problem. It's not a problem to fetch image from the cloud or load something from resources, but as I saw, we have some solution based on current libraries with additional dependencies for Jetpack Compose. Can we use some feature of Jetpack Compose like trackable model values with layouts done in XML? With Jetpack Compose, even right now, we can use view groups. We can add view group to Jetpack Compose. However, we cannot really add Jetpack Compose to the XML file. But later on, we will have this generate view annotations. We generate view for current view framework based on a contract described with Jetpack Compose. Was Anka deprecated because of Jetpack Compose? Did you compare it to Compose library? I not compare it. If I remember correctly, Anka, it was part of a tool from JetBrains, but Jetpack Compose is developing in Google. Even right now, we have pretty fun situations that for Jetpack Compose, you need a bit different version of plugin, because they Google developers use some undocumented features from compiler from the Kotlin, and right now it's a bit two different compilers. But I believe later on, before release, it will be synchronized with main version. And sometimes when you check which compiler you should add, in compiler I mean it's plugin which is added to Gradle configuration of the project. It's not complex to set up the project. So in this case, it's different plugin and different developers. I don't think that that the main reason of deprecation of Anka is Jetpack Compose. I think that is all questions. If you have any questions, if you have any questions, please ask on chat or ask on Mentimeter, and I will answer on them. And if we don't have new questions, I think that's all. Thank you for participating, and thank you for Java user group Łódź meetup, and thank you for Mobile Twente for opportunity to speak. And I'm super happy to deliver, and hope it will be valuable for you. Let's check last time questions which we have on chat and Mentimeter. We have no questions on chat, and let's check Mentimeter. Yes, we don't have any more questions. Thank you for your time. Thank you for participating. I hope it was helpful for you. And videos soon will be published on channel if you want to check. And below the video, I'll publish in a few minutes also link to the presentation and to the GitHub repository where you can check whole example. Thank you again. Have a good evening.